The country is experiencing unprecedented protests, the streets are boiling, the government is at its weakest, and everyone was waiting for a single word from the king that could change the face of politics in Morocco. But the royal speech was completely different from all expectations. There was absolutely no mention of the cooking oil generation, no reference at all to these protests or this public anger, no mention of the government, as if nothing had happened. So here is the big question that everyone is asking now. Why did the king ignore this crisis at a moment when all Moroccans were waiting for a decisive stance? Is this a tactical and clever silence from the king? And what are the real messages that the king sent internally and externally? We will answer all of this today. Stay with us. Dear viewers, peace be upon you and God's mercy and blessings, and welcome to our renewed meeting today, God willing, from the series of Al-Rari episodes, which we dedicate to analyzing this royal speech that was delivered on the occasion of the opening of the legislative session of the Moroccan Parliament. Today, everyone in Morocco was waiting for this speech. Everyone in Morocco watched this speech live. We can say that perhaps this speech on this occasion achieved the highest viewership ever. And of course, as everyone knows, that's because it came at a critical time. It came when the Moroccan public is experiencing these protests, what's called the oil generation, and this great popular anger at this government, Acknowledgment's government. So, in reality, everyone in Morocco was waiting for a strong signal from the king. Everyone was waiting for that. Even if just a part of this speech, that it would be about the olive oil generation, or about the demands of the olive oil generation. And the most important of these demands is the demand to bring down this government, the Acknouch government. But the observation today is that despite all this, despite all these protests that took place, despite all these events that have dominated public discussion recently, especially the controversy surrounding the health sector and so on. However, the speech was far from all of this. The speech did not talk about, or even mention at all, those who called themselves today the olive oil generation, nor did it talk about the demands of the olive oil generation. The speech was limited to just general talk about social justice, territorial development, rural centers, improving citizens' living conditions, and so on. Today, there's a big question from everyone. Why did the king ignore talking about these protests or about the olive oil generation? So the first point we will talk about today is something that everyone should know and everyone should be convinced of today. It is that if the king had addressed the issue of these protests, it would have been an official acknowledgement of this crisis. It would have given these protests greater legitimacy. It would have been like pouring oil on the fire. Some expected a historic decision like dissolving parliament. Others anticipated an announcement about dismissing the government, a minister or something similar. So was that even possible? No, not at all. That wasn't possible. I mean, for a number of reasons. And today I will present to you, as I mentioned in the previous episode that was about this topic, about the oil generation protests and so on. I mean, these protests. They were directed and guided. These protests were softly steered. We can say there's no possibility at all. Today you're talking about dismissing this government. The option of the king intervening to dismiss this government is completely off the table. It's absolutely impossible. There is only a plan to weaken these ruling parties, the liberal parties. That's it. They're finished. Today, a new global trend led by President Trump is emerging. Global liberalism is collapsing everywhere, not just in Morocco. First of all, if the king spoke directly about the demands of the generation, oil, and a request for immediate action like this, I mean, this would be interpreted as a political decision. It would count against the current government and thus disrupt the equations for institutional stability in Morocco. And perhaps there will be those who say at that time that the king was the one who triggered these protests, because it was no longer possible to resolve international issues with this liberal government in place. And there will also be those who say that it was an undemocratic act. Since the elections are only a few months away, the king cannot risk the issue of stability and dismiss the government, especially when it's just a matter of a few weeks. We will soon face an electoral deadline and new elections, where this government will be democratically removed at the ballot box without interference. I mean, neither through the democratic and electoral process, nor through the stability that Morocco currently enjoys. Even this government is not allowed to leave. This government is not allowed stability. Why? Because there is an important phase. Morocco is going through it now, and it requires maintaining this stability. Today, for example, if we talk about the Sahara issue, the Moroccan Sahara, Morocco is going through a very sensitive phase. In this issue, a decisive phase, there is a very delicate diplomatic process coming up at the United Nations. There is a crucial date at the end of this month, October. So any major internal crisis during this period will have a very significant impact on this path. It will affect this decisive phase of the Moroccan Sahara issue. This might weaken the Moroccan position, and it could create diplomatic material that can be exploited. This is used by hostile parties, Morocco's opponents. That's why the king now avoids talking about these protests as if they don't exist, so that Morocco's image remains stable. We're just talking about speaking here, so imagine if there was a decision to dismiss the government or even allow this government to resign, as I also explained to you. Even if we talk from an economic perspective, dismissing the government, dissolving parliament, or any major internal political shake-up would have a high economic cost. Whether in terms of borrowing costs, the attractiveness of projects, investments, and so on, or in terms of the tourism sector, or the confidence of international partners, and so on. Today, for example, if King Mohammed VI had addressed this issue of protests or held a session about it, the whole world would be talking about this speech today. All international media outlets would have been talking about this speech. Why? Because they would shine the spotlight on this point. By influencing, there are protests in Morocco, and the situation is serious. The government could be overthrown and security may deteriorate. And today the king intervenes. He gave a speech on this matter. He spoke and he said it like this. So the king was very smart because he avoided addressing this topic so as not to give Morocco's opponents a chance to spread rumors, on a global level, that there is instability in Morocco, or to cast doubt on the state's ability to manage these issues and to fulfill these international commitments. The most important one today, as everyone knows, is the 2030 World Cup. This is just to point it out so everyone is aware. Pay close attention to the fact that right after these protests by Generation Z, there were even people saying that Morocco is not capable of hosting the Africa Cup. So pay close attention to how such matters are being exploited. There were people calling for the hosting rights to be withdrawn from Morocco. This is just a simple example, but if the king had addressed this issue, we would have seen, a bigger example. We would have seen Morocco's opponents exploiting this even more. So with this speech, the king is actually being realistic. We could say that he sent two messages, an internal message and an external message. The external message was directed to the international community, to investors, to partners, and so on. And that is, the country is stable. There is political stability, there is governmental stability. There is no indication or impression that there could be a government change before the scheduled time. He also sent a message that there is a clear developmental roadmap. There is leadership, a role model, and strong institutions. It's just that things need to move faster. According to the demands, speed up. These development programs, there is no room for anything else. Meanwhile, the internal message was directed to the government, directed to the parties, and as I said, it came in the words of this speech: work quickly, the development programs must be accelerated, show tangible results to the youth and marginalized areas. This message puts the ministries of health, education, labor and so on under executive pressure and gives them opportunities to launch exceptional measures before the elections. Either they show tangible results or they will face failure in the upcoming elections. So here the king, in fact, did not ignore the protests of the generation. Oil in the sense of denial, absolutely not. It is ignoring it as a very calculated and smart political tactic to calm the situation, not leaving any room for opponents to maneuver and exploit the situation in these very sensitive circumstances and this critical stage. So now, after today's speech, we can say that Morocco is facing two possibilities, facing only two possible scenarios. The first scenario is that this government responds quickly, significantly improves performance, and acts swiftly in the upcoming challenging phase. That means there are about 10 or 12 months, let's say about 10 months. So in the coming phase, we might see a clear and tangible acceleration for development projects and programs. Therefore, the ruling parties today, meaning the Liberal Party and the Authenticity and Modernity Party, are taking advantage of this remaining period in government to fix whatever can be fixed, and thus absorb the anger, the public anger, and enter the upcoming electoral contest. From the standpoint of achievements, from the standpoint of recent achievements to rectify the situation, the second scenario is that there are no practical steps from this government, or at least there won't be major steps. Superficial steps won't convince the public, so protests and public anger will continue until the time for elections comes, and then the government is brought down through the ballot box. So the question remains for you now. Which scenario do you think is most likely? Answer us in the comments below this video and subscribe now by clicking the like button. Peace be upon you, God's mercy and blessings. See you next time.